Microphone's on table, something big.
We're going to take just a second before we start. Ms. Mahaffey may be joining us, so. Is she on? Melissa was checking. Oh, you were here.
She's on.
Then we can, without further ado, we can get started. Okay, Dr. Conley.
Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Merrill, we're here to provide you with a legislative update, just an update on activities and decisions that have been made in the legislative session. Courtney Crowder, our legislative liaison, will lead you through the materials that are in your assembly backup materials.
Sir, thank you, and Madam Chair and board members, good to see you as always. I want to give a quick highlight of sort of what happened. This session was coming to a close back at the end of June, and before we get started with the next few legislative sessions that are scheduled to occur. As you know, we have another session that's scheduled to begin on August 3rd, and another that's scheduled to begin on September 6th. The August 3rd, and I won't bore you with all the details, but the adjournment resolution for the session that just concluded set out a really limited scope of what would be eligible for consideration in the next legislative session, the August 3rd legislative session. Can really limit it to bills that have been filed that are still eligible from this previous session's crossover. Of course, redistricting legislation would be part of what's eligible for this session. And there were a number of bills that started, that passed both chambers, but were set up to be negotiated in conference committee because the House and Senate versions of the same bill were different. Each chamber made minor adjustments, and so there were a number of conference committees that were established on a number of pieces. One of which I'll mention a little bit later because we've been monitoring it. So I wanted to just sort of give you that context for the upcoming, sort of what the schedule is going to be for the next few months with the legislature. That's a little bit different for us. Typically, when they adjourn a long session, like we just did, session would not reconvene until the following spring, the following April, late April or May, because of some anticipated issues with redistricting and perhaps some other, Health and Human Services issues in DC. They just thought it wise to go ahead and hold the time for possible state legislative sessions for August and September. So that's sort of the schedule, sort of globally. In your materials, you'll have the two spreadsheets that we typically use to track bills. Just as a reminder, all the bills that are listed in both spreadsheets are items that pass crossover and that are still eligible for consideration. The items that are in red are the items that are the bills that actually have been the bills that of course are eligible, that we are tracking, and that are enrolled, that pass both chambers, finished their process, are enrolled, and have been sent to the governor for his action. And so of course he'll either sign or not sign or possibly veto. But that's what the that's a local bill. That's what the 11 or the red indicates. Those, and if you look on both lists, it's not a. I think Mr. Blumberg and I were talking earlier. It's not a huge amount of bills that actually made it to its final form and were presented to the governor. Around a dozen or so. And I'll just read the list so you know if there are any specific questions we can talk about. Senate Bill 55, which is the school bus camera civil penalties bill, which has been presented to the governor. That's the stop arm camera on school buses. There's a study, the cost to comply with federal with federal education funds, and the program evaluation division is studying that issue. You have the teacher excellence, Senate Bill 169, program expansion, professors in the classroom, which has been signed. You have Senate Bill 599, which you talked in detail about that bill as it was going through. The excellent educators in every classroom. It's been enrolled and sent to the governor. There are a few technical corrections bills. There's an omnibus education bill, House Bill 155. We've talked about the students with dyslexia legislation that's coming through. And probably one of the things that we'll certainly talk more about, as the months go on, which is House Bill 704, which is the Divide School Systems Study Commission. And so that bill also has been presented to the governor. He's not yet acted on it, but it has been presented. A couple of outstanding issues that have not been resolved that I just want to make sure that I highlight. Of course, local redistricting is an issue that's still eligible for discussion in the upcoming sessions, but it's not been resolved. Senate Bill 117, which is the I think we've talked about as well, the anti-pension spiking language that's there, and then the county commissioner's role in school building acquisition, House Bill 482. That's one of the bills that passed both chambers. There was a little bit of a tweak in the Senate to that bill. So the House voted not to concur, and a conference committee was established, but they weren't able to finish their work, finish negotiating that bill before session ended. So that's one that would be eligible for consideration in August when they reconvene. I know that there'll be more of a budget discussion later, but I wanted to, just sort of share with you those items. If all of the bills, all of them are fairly substantive, and so what we've done is, as those bills have come through, we've shared it with our subject matter experts on the team, on the broader team, for analysis and make sure that everyone's aware of sort of what's happening and how they might impact the district. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you for the time.
Any questions?
This is exciting stuff, guys.
Yes, exciting that we have a shorter break than usual.
But surprised to see that our local bill still here in red for the for Green Level High School.
It's in red. But because it's a local bill, it actually didn't require the governor's signature, so it's already law.
Okay.
Yes,
So
sir. I've just tracked it, and maybe I put it in bolder red. That was maybe my note. So
okay. All right. So we're good there. We're
good.
clear.
Yes,
We've
sir.
got the two communities. All right.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yes, sir. So that's just on the next time you see a spreadsheet, it won't be there.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
More curiosity, the professors in the classroom, do we have a position on that in terms of here? I'm always concerned when I hear that language because professor is a title that gets thrown around very loosely. I think at NC State we had something like 32 different categories of faculty. Not all would we necessarily want in a classroom.
Right. We don't have a position. This popped up late. A little of my sense was it was more for the CTE end that would allow those kinds of teachers to come in. But beyond that, no, we don't have a position.
It seems like it's one of these things that, if crafted correctly, could be useful, but it looks to me like it may be too general language that could open the barn door that we don't necessarily want open.
There are small preparatory requirements, as you may. Well, if you didn't open the bill, you might not have seen it. It's very short. But beyond that, it's pretty much the local decision across North Carolina on who they need and how they bring them in.
Okay.
So, I don't envision us much in Wake taking advantage of that. I cut you off.
No, the committee conversation around the bill was just that. It was some.
Well, I'm not worried about me.
You might be teaching chemistry. I just want
You
to
can
know.
get through the board.
I just teach the teachers.
The basically, the conversation in committee was about, some of the smaller LEAs that wanted to maybe use some of the community college instructors to help them on math or CTE.
That's actually would be a benefit to some of our.
No, like I said, there can be some benefit, but anytime there's roots around, sort of standard credentialing, I have caution. Because people would get hired at the last minute to teach a course at a community college or even at a university. And I think we want to make sure we have the appropriate vetting and training, and working in a classroom of high school kids is different than with the college kids.
But Dr. Martin, I think it is indicative of the increasing shortage.
It is indicative of shortage.
And
Yeah.
legislatures and districts are trying to figure whatever way they can to bring more adults who can assist into the classrooms.
Right.
Okay,
Thank you.
looks like that's it. Thank you very much as always, Mr. Brown.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Meetings will continue until interest in education improves.
Yeah.
All right. Again,
I just want to make sure that it's appropriate. I mean, I will do that. Bills like this.
Okay, so this afternoon, we want to give you a little bit of a budget update. We're going to talk about the final state budget. We have a lot of numbers that are finalized. We still have numbers that we're looking at. We heard a webinar today, and we have the statewide business services meeting next week, where we'll continue to get additional information on the state of North Carolina. But a lot of this you've heard previously, so I'm going to go through that quickly. Salaries and what the salary ranges are. And then we'll come to the recommendations for the local budget at the tail end. So we'll try to get through the first part quickly so we can have that discussion. So teacher salaries is the first thing we'll discuss. See where we have increases over most of the steps. No change at the beginning step. You'll see increases anywhere from $550 to $3,300, up to 6.9%. Another piece, the veteran teachers increased by $300, or 0.6%, and then there's a lump sum bonus. We'll have that show up again in just a minute. Something new this year is for highly qualified teaching graduates when they're a new teacher that's being hired. They're from an approved educator preparation and the grade point average and score on the Ed TPA. They get a bump, 3 years experience at the hiring point. If they teach at a low performing school, 2 years experience in exceptional children's science technologies, and 1 year experience for all others in first year of employment. So that's a new step that
Mark,
states.
can you clarify on this? Is this just for teachers hired this year? So if a person would have qualified based on these and was hired last year, then they will be at the second year level, but the person hired this year could be bumped to the third year level?
My understanding is new teachers hired this year.
So the answer is yes, this could bump new teachers.
July
above.
1st forward.
Yeah, okay.
That's my understanding.
Another equity issue.
Yeah.
Keith had a question.
Low performing defined as a DOF school. The first bullet from the second part. 3 years of experience of teaching in a low performing school as defined by.
I'm assuming that. I do not know. Kathy, is that?
I'm going to guess it's the low performing designation. There's a designation for low performing and continually low performing, so it's whoever's designated as low performing.
Recurring.
So that's a 3-year bump in where they start on the salary scale.
Correct.
Okay. And then they move up from there, presumably.
Correct. Veteran teachers receive a retention bonus of $385. This bonus has to be paid in October, and it does not count toward their retirement.
And they get to pay taxes on that.
Yes.
Yes, they
Of course
do. They do not have any tax-free payments.
Thank you, Ash.
So teacher bonuses.
$10 a month, what do you got to
I
complain
know,
about?
That's right.
Yes, I'm like, Oh, they get an extra
35 years, we're
Starbucks.
gonna give you a bonus of $20 a month. I mean,
Teacher bonuses, similar to last year, we have APIB, CTE, and third grade bonuses. It did increase the maximum in APIB. It removed the requirement for licensed teachers. They no longer have to be teaching that course or at that grade level. They just have to be in the LEA teaching now. And for APIB and CTE, they have included charter schools, but not in third grade bonuses. Did not include charter schools. And then the new bonus this year is for 4th and 5th grade reading teacher. Basically follows the same requirements. We have the bonus amount of $21.50. Again, not toward retirement. Same requirements that they must be in the LEA, not teaching the grade level in that school. Assistant principal salaries, we put in a slide just to say how we pay the salaries now, which includes longevity based on years of experience as an educator, degree level. This is the new requirements for assistant principal, schedule linked to the A schedule, shows the ranges of increases. They do lose longevity. They do keep advanced degree and doctorate. And there is a hold harmless clause from the state for this year. Understanding is it's a 1-year hold harmless with the state. Principal salaries, our current basis, years of experience, size of school, longevity eligible. The new salary schedule eliminates all the principal schedules, implements based on size of the school, the ADM of the current school, and past performance. So school growth at each school the principal served 2 prior years.
Just if I can just interject, just to answer Keith's question, low performing defined by statute is a D or an F. The current legislation says and school growth score of met growth or not met expected growth. So if it's met or not expected, then got a D or an F. There's a legislative proposal to remove the met growth. So it would just be D and F and did not meet growth. So we'll see what that goes. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
Mark, is there any explanation for narrowing the window of the pay range? I mean, I'm glad the bottom got bumped up, but the top got bumped down dramatically. That I saw that, and that was very concerning to me.
An explanation?
I mean, yeah, is it not a typo? And I'm assuming it's not.
Courtney's still here, so, I mean, I don't know of an explanation.
But I mean, this would be very concerning.
Somewhere.
Right, but this would be very concerning.
The pie doesn't grow
What is
unless they want it to.
Hold harmless would mean that if you're currently paid that, you get to keep it potentially?
For 1 year.
For 1 year? But I mean,
Right.
yeah, we're talking 20%.
And they also,
pay cut.
again, these increases, they lose longevity. So
that doesn't-
that's
makes
out of the
sense.
picture
Yeah.
now.
Right, so you subtract that from the equation.
Right.
Yeah, then how do you get a
So,
100% cut?
so that's been the legal question that I've been trying to wrestle with some is the possibility that we're on contract with somebody and that over the course of the contract that there would be a reduction in pay. And having to address that from a legal perspective, particularly in light of the statute that basically says that you cannot demote without going through due process, and demotion has always been defined as a reduction in pay. So we have a legal issue there, hopefully that it's one that will never come to bear and that there won't be a situation where somebody actually would experience a reduction, but we're worried about that potential.
And to go along with the base salary, we now have principal bonuses. 2 different options. And you notice these are treated as bonuses. They are not subject to retirement, which is we don't really necessarily understand anyway, because it seems to be performance based on a job. However, if you're not taking out retirement, that doesn't act as if it's performance-based.
Right.
So that's another question Jonathan might want to look at some point in time. So based on the top 50% state measured by growth in school supervised, so you'll see the top 5% is 5,000. Explains it. And the second bonus available is who supervised the school for principals who supervised the school 15, 16, 16, 17, and the school did not exceed growth in 15, 16, and the school exceeded growth in 16, 17. So it was $5,000 if an A, B, or C school, or $10,000 if it was a D or F school.
So the top 50% in the state, regardless of size of school, get into the pool from which the bonuses, then the principal has to meet the items in number 2 here?
No, these are two different bonuses.
2 different bonus pools?
Yes, it's bonus 1 and bonus 2.
Okay, so top 50% in the state measured by growth. So 20% at grade level to 50% at grade level, I'm likely to be in the top 5% of schools with a 30% gain. Is it gain or is it aggregate performance? It says measured by growth, it
This
would
is
be
growth,
gain.
so that would seem like it's gain.
Kathy, do you?
That's it's just curious. I mean, student assignment, plant closing, I mean, all kinds of things could happen that would have dramatic impact on the aggregate performance of a school.
It's school-wide growth. I think school-wide growth is reported as the percent of students who met or exceeded growth.
From beginning of year to end of year? Or from
whatever the
end of year
previous-
to end of year?
Generally from the previous assessment to the next
Right.
assessment.
So it would be impacted by assignment decisions in a district like ours.
Could be,
Like if any school that's subject to a lot of churn or
A lot of churn,
turbulence.
yeah.
right.
So if you got 40% students who don't start the year with you, but end the year with you,
This is simplistic Band-Aid
yeah.
that does not do what it needs to do.
Right. It doesn't recognize, the money's appreciated, but it doesn't recognize the complexities that wind up with the school that doesn't grow. And you can work your fanny off and your staff can be dedicated and committed, but if 40% of your students change from day one to the end of the year, it's a mountain that's tough to climb.
But you have to have them there so long for their scores
So
to
they actually
count.
Right.
growth.
Well, if they're
So,
there for the whole year, though, I mean, what is that number to be there, to be enrolled for how long before their score counts? Maybe somebody with accountability can tell me.
I think it's 120 days.
Yeah,
120 days. 120 days.
120 days. It's still a challenge.
And I would say that this category of employee will take us the longest to calculate, even though it's one of the smallest.
Right.
And communicating with the division of principals, I told them it's going to be a couple of months because each one's got to be looked at one by one. Did you move? What was your growth in that school? So if we'll get it right, it'll just take a little longer than some of the other employees.
Okay.
Again, back to the complexity of district
Yeah.
and all the impact variables that you don't think of.
Yeah, the state today told us that principals needed to be paid by October 31st, so they do recognize the difficulty because that's the deadline they've given us to correct the principal's pay.
And this applies to last year's performance? If they're going to be paid by
Yeah.
October? Okay.
So non-certified and central office is a little bit easier. It's $1,000 for permanent employees, employed for 12 months, and then you prorate it depending on whether part-time, temporary. The OTPTs had a schedule that said we must adopt a minimum. We did a schedule this spring in either April or May for the OTPTs. We've already looked at that schedule and we meet the requirements. So we're fine staying on that schedule. And this does not include bus drivers. The $1,000 does not include bus drivers. The bus drivers, the state appropriated $16.9 million statewide to be allocated to the LEAs. We don't really have directions on how to allocate it out to pay yet. We are thinking it's a $1.6 million increase from the state for our bus drivers, and this is in lieu of a $1,000 increase. But this is bus drivers only, not transportation. The transportation department, other than bus drivers, will receive the $1,000 bonus as other central office employees will.
Well, but are they off 12 months?
The bus drivers or non-bus drivers?
Transportation.
Many of them are. You think about the mechanics, team leaders, staff, office staff. And then the special annual leave bonus, where all employees, and this is for all employees, receive 3 days, cannot be cashed out, can be carried forward 3 additional days of leave. Benefit contributions, retirement increase, health insurance increase, and you see the impact on Wake County public schools, the local costs and the state costs.
Mark, related to that, do you have the health insurance increase to the individual, particularly given these $300 bumps in salary? Are we paying more than $300 additional in healthcare?
You mean for the different plans?
Yeah.
We do not have that now.
Okay.
We'll see that this fall when they put out the new rates for January. And there is potential for change again, we're hearing, on the different types of plans they will offer. Budget flexibility, no funds should be transferred out of Children with Disabilities or LEP. No funds will be transferred out of AIG, and that's an impact of $4.8 million locally. Children with disabilities and academically gifted, again, you've seen this slide before. It did change, the cap changed by 0.25%, which is an additional $1.65 million increase in state funds.
Do I not recall that we're like at 13.1%?
We are right around 13%.
So the cap going up is good, but there's still,
Way behind.
we're still behind, and that differential is still going to be like $2 or $3 million.
That's
Talk
correct.
about disability, right?
That's the children with,
I'm
yeah.
just wondering about the AG.
And the AIG, we had like, what, 18% identified?
Yeah, I
And we're
think
capped at 4.
4. That's the one I really.
Central office reductions, a 7.4% or $7 million reduction in 17-18. It increases to $11 million in 2018-19. We have received our allotments from the state in this area, and it ended up, good news, it was a $200,000 reduction instead of 10%, which is what we normally feel like we are in the state's budget. So it was a $200,000 reduction for 17-18. But we'll have an additional $3 million in 2018.
300.
300,000, sorry. Take out the zero. Textbooks, we discussed previously, it's a $1.13 million increase in state funds. Cooperative Innovative High Schools, we're receiving $200,000 per school. We did not receive money for all schools last year. The $200,000 we will receive for all schools, so we'll receive it for 5, is that correct? We have 6 schools now? 6 schools now at $200,000 each. It is a decrease in total state funds, but we'll also have a decrease in local costs because we'll have that funding for 2 schools we did not expect. So, this is to the local budget now. So our county appropriation request was $45.2 million. We received $21 million, and that leaves a reconciliation point of $24.2 million. So with some of that information we shared previously, here's the estimated state budget impact. The left-hand column is increases and/or decreases in the state funding. The right-hand column is the effect on the local funding. So you see some of the items we talked about, such as bus driver salary increase is an increase in state funding. The salary increases, hospital retirement rate. The change in flexibility was a reduction of $4.8 million from the state. On the local side, you see the salary increases, retirement rates, and there's the change in flexibility, additional $4.8 million, central office reduction, and then we have the reductions for children with disabilities and the innovative high school. So the total local impact is $4.6 million based on what we received from the state. Business case adjustments. So these are business cases that were in our original budget, and we have made adjustments now in order to reconcile the budget. So one of the items we have is outside the calendar professional learning days. And Kathy, do you want to speak to Title I grant is now covering those funds, correct?
Yes, we do not anticipate that the Title I budget can continue to sustain it. That's where it had been. I think the carryover was a little higher, the allotment we got was a little higher, and so we're able to carry that at least for another year.
The second line is adding one-time costs for allotments to schools beyond formula. And we often talk about over-under and how we need to use funds and what we have to do when schools open up, and that our budget never stops moving. Well, these are things that we've had to reconcile so far this year in 18 days. It's $416,000. So that's an addition.
That's just 7 positions.
It is just 18
That's
days.
just 7 positions
In 18 days.
In 18
So we've
days.
done really well is what you're saying.
across 165,000 students, 43,000 of which are in school.
In 18 days.
The,
Over the 43 schools that open.
right.
Okay.
Well, that's our point, yes.
We have a lot of points.
The market responsive compensation. So the 1.6 million that is reduced from our budget request is tied to the bus drivers, because we were hoping to do one of the areas we hoped to advance because of the market was bus drivers' salaries. Because the state has given us an additional 1.6 million, we are pulling that out of the market responsive compensation category. So we reduced that.
Now that will focus, this will now mean we'll focus that all on the bus drivers. Before we had bus drivers and a few other employees, didn't we, or was it all?
There will be some, the total amount for this was more than 1.6.
Yeah.
We may leave that there for other categories of
Gotcha.
employee, but that's allowed us to reduce. You'll see it
Yeah.
ahead.
We had a request in for funding Title VI-B positions, and we removed that case based on the federal carryover allowance. We could take care of that with some of the federal carryover funds.
Again, 1 year fix.
Right.
One year fixed, are we going to be able to continue it at the same level, or is there going to also be reduction?
It'll be
in
another
service?
business case next year likely.
But we're maintaining this year at the same level of service?
The case, in the $3.2 million case in the budget was an increase
Right.
based on numbers in different areas. We're able to remove that case and not request the increased funds because we're able to use carryover funds that came in over in order to address it, but that's a 1 year solution.
Right. My question is, are we going to be able to continue service as we have?
Right now, yes.
Were we were planning to expand service or not?
No, this includes new programs. This is
Okay.
the new programs.
Okay.
Covers it.
Yeah.
Connections Alternative Middle School, we had to add a data manager, it's $34,000. In the spring, again, we speak about over-under. We had some funds in over-under that we went ahead and spent as a one-time allocation. We accelerated the cost for some instructional content and device repair. So that reduced out of our budget. And just to remember, you are given a report of the over/under multiple times during the year that will have those type transactions. So we try to remain transparent when we give you those reports, so you'll know what we're doing with those categories of over/under. So, other recommended adjustments. So, this will be your decision over the next couple of weeks, but we're recommending reducing transportation's budget by $3 billion because of our inability to hire staff. As we've talked about before, we are receiving state money because we're so efficient. We're so efficient because we do so many bus routes and transport so many schools with so few drivers and buses on the road. That doesn't mean the transportation's perfect in their delivery of students, but it's the best and as efficient as we can be. So if the 1.6 million makes a difference in the bus driver salary and we can start hiring bus drivers, this could be an item that's now potentially at risk for the following year because our costs will increase, and when we hire more bus drivers and have more buses, we become less efficient in the state's mind,
Yes.
and they will provide less money for that area.
Which, not taking into the impact efficiency for us and efficiency for a family is not the same thing.
Right. Well, that's.
Let's just be
yeah.
clear on what we're talking about.
Well, and that's why we are
Yes.
attempting to hire
I'm
more.
just making sure we're all clear.
We are
Right.
very clear on that.
So and we're not really planning on going over it today, but you have a potential risk page supporting in the documentation. This is the type thing, depending on your decision today, does this become a potential risk for a future year? And that page will change throughout the school year, and we will most likely give you that in a report, either monthly or quarterly. We'll give you the potential risk as we move forward because of things that we'll face during the year. But some of these decisions that will be made over the next couple of weeks will change that page in itself, if you agree to these. In my mind, the next one's another potential risk. So we're increasing fund balance appropriation by 5.9 million, which makes our total fund balance appropriation for the year 12.8 million of the 13.8 we have available in unassigned fund balance. So that roughly leaves us with $1 million in unassigned. Now remember, that is fiscal year 2016. Our board policy states that you'll put no more than 50% of your fund balance into balancing this year's budget. So that would require a waiver of board policy 8101.
And our daily operating cost is $6 million?
Roughly $5 million.
$5 million.
We could
So
work
we
about
got
15 minutes.
2 hours.
2 hours.
2 hours in fund balance.
Just time to get the kids to school.
That wouldn't even complete the transportation.
Oh, you're right.
No.
It wouldn't be, it wouldn't all be.
They wouldn't even get there.
You'd have to get off.
Feed them lunch. Lunch takes about 2 hours.
So now that leads us to a new local reconciliation. We started out with the 24.2. We saw the state budget impact of 4.6 million. The business case adjustments were around 6 million. Transportation adjustments around 3 million. Fund balance adjustment 5.9. So now there's $13.9 million of local funding that we still must reconcile. So we went to the categories on the budget. The first is the growth business cases, which is basically the cost of the additional students. And in order to change anything on this page, you would require changing a formula, which would basically lead to less resources for the students. We have nothing on this page we're recommending at this time. The next area is program continuity, and you see a note down there where the red lines indicate adjustments already made. So we discussed the outside the calendar professional learning, so we've now removed that. So the new number total in program continuity is 4.3 million. So this is needed to maintain existing services. Services could be reduced, and the one possibility on this schedule is delaying extra duty salary schedule implementation of 1 year. We look today, this is year 3 of a 5-year plan. Year 1 and 2 totaled about a $4.1 million increase. Year 3 through 5 totaled right at 4.1 million. So the first 2 years, we've done half of the increase that was projected over the 5-year period. So that's one option, and that's you'll see that's the $2.5 million on this schedule. The next area is new or expanding programs and business cases. Again, the red line items, Dr. Merrill spoke to the market responsive compensation. You see where that dropped down to $564,000 after we removed the transportation of $1.6 million. Kathy spoke to the $3.5 million for the Title VI-B that we're dealing with federal carry forward. Let's see, what else do we have? The Second Chance online resources, the credit, it's a reduction to the category because we spent an additional $420,000 with last year's over-under. So that's why that number changed. Connections, that was a plus $34,000. That was for the data manager. And then device repair was reduced based on spending, accelerating the cost in the spring also. So the new number is $14.5 million. So you're looking for $13.9 million. We have $14.5 million on the board. You could remove expansion of counselors and other instructional support. You could eliminate all new or expanding programs. That would pretty much balance your budget. So those are some thoughts. The elimination of counselors and the delaying of the extra duty pay is 12.6 million. Just those 2 line items.
And that's the expansion of counselors. Yeah, not just.
Yes, expansion,
eliminate-
yes.
Eliminated counselors.
Sorry, Terry, what did you say, Terry? 12 point?
It would be 12.6 million of the amount that we need to reconcile,
Okay.
which would leave 1.3 million still to be determined, potentially from the remaining items on this page.
So,
Those were two, Mark, those were just 2 very big items that would get you close to balanced,
More
but
bang
it's
for our
not
buck, but
balanced
bigger
yet.
impact.
You're still 1.3,
Yes.
yeah. And we didn't start going smaller than that. But if you didn't accept those, then you'd increase the amount you need to balance.
Yeah.
We tried to get you to the trough of water about as best we could, so.
Yeah, big budget item, big impact.
Right.
so we're under an interim budget. It allows for usual and ordinary expenditures. We would like any feedback we can receive today. We really do not think that we will bring a budget until mid-August. It could even be later if necessary. We would like to get as close as we can to the recommendation so we can finalize the budget. Today, any ideas you have, we'll take with us. We'll bring another session similar to this, not going through all this detail, but just the last few pages, for discussion to the August 1st board meeting. Terry has a spreadsheet staring her in the face for any recommendations you want to make. She could shift them out of one column and put them in another to tell you what it would cost and where we would be, so.
Thank you for your efficiency.
Yeah, just what you.
But we did not expect, really didn't expect you to be making or directing us where to go today.
Oh, that's
I
good.
mean, you've got to take a lot in. You may not even be ready at the next meeting. It may take 2 more questions back and forth and this and that. So didn't really expect you to be directing us today. Plus you got 1.5 absences.
Yes.
I expect Lindsay to speak up on that, but she didn't.
I know.
Sorry, I had to find
I'm
out.
here,
got half.
sorry. I mean, you're half, he's counting you as a half.
I'm just trying to process it all. I'm glad we have more time.
I concur. Mr. Sutton, Mr. Proctor.
I would say on the extra duty pay, I sort of feel like we've made a commitment in that direction already, and that's sort of in process. So I would personally be reluctant
I agree.
to consider that one. So if that's one, and if the rest of the board feels the same, maybe we can go ahead and take that off the table as far as one that can be considered.
I feel the same.
I agree. The commitment is our integrity to our employees. But other folks?
I agree. The challenge is, what is the $2 million hole we have to, what goes into that $2 million hole?
Think of it this way, Mr. Fletcher. We're still building the whole hole, how we're going to.
I understand. No,
I know that doesn't help.
And I agree. Sentiment, I agree.
Yeah.
You know, I hated to put orchestra support
I know.
on the life support last time.
Now that my daughter's an orchestra musician.
I had occasion at lunch today to hear an excellent career teacher talk about a girl in her class, and this is a third grade class, that refused to speak to the teacher. Okay, 4th year of school, 3rd grade class, refused to speak to the teacher. And she and the school counselor worked together to develop a strategy to engage the student, to help the student find their voice, to feel safe, to feel that it was okay for her to talk. Unabashedly made a statement to the student and their parent during the conference early in the year that you will talk to me by the end of the year. And develop strategies to do that, and slowly, one day, remarkably, the student raised her hand in class to answer a question. And the wall had been broken. But it took multiple professionals with a focused plan, consistency of reinforcing positive behaviors and encouragement and pats on the back, in order for that barrier to be broken for that one student. And so when it comes to the idea behind the counselors and social workers, was to be able to have that additional resource available in schools with the highest needs to break through more of those barriers. And so that, I mean, that's $10 million. I mean, that gives me great pause that when we're saying we're gonna eliminate the ability to predict outcomes based on race, ethnicity, and family affluence, it's going to take strategies like that to do it. And I'm disappointed that we're faced with that as one of our choices, given the budget picture that's been drawn by both the state and the county. That's not a choice that I want to make, to postpone providing the services necessary to our most needy children.
I concur with these sentiments, and you know, not only do we have this 13 million, but we've got the additional 5.9 coming out of our fund balance based on this.
Right, and that's
just
right.
That's irresponsible. But you know, so I guess my brain is thinking right now that I think we've got to have at least a twofold strategy. It's probably got to be more multi-pronged than that, but we're going to have to come up with a budget based on the state and the county. appropriations that we currently have. But in our negotiations, if that is what they can be called, with the county, and they were talking about the fund balance, they said, look, you don't need a fund balance because we've got a fund balance that when you have needs.
Right.
Well, we have needs.
Right.
And so my sense is that we need to come up with our base budget, but then we need to do a better job of articulating some needs as acute needs, the kinds of things that we would potentially do with our fund balance or whatnot. And I think we need to go to the county commissioners and say, look, you said you wanted this funding structure. Here's a need that needs to be filled. And it strikes me that two logical, acute things, we've talked about this a lot with the, sort of the magnet issue with Southeast Raleigh, the express busing transportation does not work
Yeah,
Right.
Right.
for
it does not. We heard that loud and clear from.
Southeast Raleigh.
That's right.
That's an acute need.
Right.
So do we need to package an acute need that says, look, we're trying to get Southeast Raleigh Magnet High School to be the school that it can and should be. It's going to cost us this number of dollars. We don't have it in a fund balance anymore. By the way, county, you guys added, was it $26 million to your fund balance last year? Here's an acute need. We need to get rid of express busing. We need to get neighborhood busing to Southeast. And my feeling is we need to do the same thing potentially with counselors, maybe not the full $9 million. But we already talked about that if we were going to use this $9 million, it was not going to be just equally distributed across all of our
Right, it'd be an
schools. It
acuity
was going to be an acuity model to, take our high needs. So again, my sense is that we should look at, I'm just going to toss out, a $5-ish million acute need. Where would those acute need counselors go? Put that together as a package, again, go to the commissioners and say, outside of this budget model, you said this is how we should operate. Here is an acute need. By the way, we can give you bullying examples that show why it is an acute need, needs to be funded. So I'm tossing that out as an alternative budgeting strategy based on where we've been put in the current
Right.
budget milieu.
So I agree. So I guess there are a couple of things that I would say to us in terms of realizing, back to Dr. Merrill and Mr. Winter's point, that it's going to take us more than one board meeting. I mean, I've communicated with the commissioners, board chair, that we indeed plan to take them up on a meeting. But I think there's a couple of things that stand out to me here. One, I'll start with your point. We're going to have several strategies. Filling the basic hole of balancing our budget is one strategy. The other is, what are those acute needs that are absolute needs? Because quite frankly, back to how we all feel about, hey, we could actually cut completely two things in our budget to get us closer to balancing. We still are going to have a balancing problem. So acute needs doesn't actually fill the hole that we have. So for me, I just want to be clear for us that we have two things that we're going to have to do. And to that point, which is what I communicated to their chair, is I think it pays for them to hear this. It is one thing to say, yes, we have over and under, yes, we have carryover, but to see the transparency that we're talking about, that over-under does not fill our hole. So even when we have, so for me, I think it's important to be clear, yes, we had carryover in this business case. So we can take that off the table. We still haven't balanced the budget. So I guess I'm challenging us to be thoughtful about what our concrete strategies are. Roughly, it sounds like we at least have the next two board meetings for us, each of us, to think about kind of where we want to make those cuts. I mean, I heard Mr. Sutton propose that one place we not do that is the promise that we've already made to extra duty. But the reality is we still have twofold needs. We have needs that we absolutely know, which is why we asked for $42 billion, but we also still have to balance our budget. And I don't think we should see those as one thing, is my point. I think we have to balance our budget, and I also still think we have to ask for those acute needs, like the two you just gave. So I'm just asking us to be thoughtful, given this is the first time we're seeing it, and I'm going to have to move us to the next topic, that I wanted to put that out there in terms of strategy, in terms of how we're thinking about this as individuals. So the next time we're at the board table, we're all clear on what we're coming to talk about we want to see happen with Terry's spreadsheet that's staring her in the face. Because those are different.
We can do that.
Any other thoughts, comments, or helpful hints to your board members about how we're gonna come back to this table to talk about filling the hole and what those acute needs might be to the commissioners? Especially those of you who've been here before.
I mean, the quick math assignment would be, if extra duty is back in, then you're down 3.9. So you would go to the new and expanded page, and you'd scratch things until you got to 3.9. Is the mechanics of how you do it.
Just like the General Assembly.
Or back into some of the other earlier pages that are trickier. But anyway, that would be, sort of where do I start?
Okay, I think that's a good starting point for folks to take a look at, just caution you, the General Assembly does that and then put something back in, so we're not gonna be able to do that. We can't scratch it out and add it somewhere else. Any other questions? Lindsay's on the phone, Ms. Hartenstein's here, Mr. A.G., definitely first timers. Any other questions about strategy moving forward to how we're gonna come back to the table to talk about this? I wanna make sure we're leaving this topic with everybody knowing what the gap is and where is a good place to start to think this through.
Will there be a finance committee meeting?
We have not planned one.
Not
Is there a
between
reason?
now and the next work session.
Okay, so
Right.
no finance committee.
Not between
Hasn't
now and
been for a while,
August
just
1st,
people.
which is your next
Yeah.
board meeting / work session.
Okay.
Which
Just wanna
just
be
leaves
sure.
next week, so that's a good point. So we definitely won't have one before the 1st.
Right, okay.
Mr. Sutton? We're looking for good feedback for our board members to go forward and come back with some cuts.
Given the situation and the conversation that has been had publicly from both boards, I don't know how much value there is in making another ask. While and I ask in terms, I guess, in the sense of, while I agree with Dr. Martin, I don't know that adjusting our message or saying something different gets us there. I don't, it's not like they didn't hear or don't know. So asking me in a different way doesn't necessarily produce a different response. It seems to me that part of the issue is, well, what we define as acute needs, perhaps they don't see them as being acute. I'm right. So the question is how much of a need, or the difference is, I guess, what they see as a need and what we see as a need and how acute that need is. And I'm wondering sort of then how we start is that the board first, or because obviously there's some politics that is getting in the way. I wonder how much in terms of staff, does that sort of happen first in terms of, because at the end of the day, it seems to me it's sitting down, looking at this list and trying to prioritize or determine or come to some agreement, if you will, as to what both sides can agree on those needs are. So who's best to sort of take that stab first? Is that you and Mr. Hartman?
You mean to revisit the list that we've already completed
is
with the
that-
commissioners?
Yeah, is that, or is that you and Mr. Hutchinson?
So we have a list that we completed alongside the commissioners that we thought were shared needs that showed up in our budget. So I just want to be clear that we actually took that step. We have whiteboards, we have pictures of those whiteboards where we actually did do that, myself the chair, with the commissioners. So to your point, perhaps maybe it is going back to the list and saying, hey, here's a reminder of this list that we clearly didn't get funded for when we made the request. But they do have a list. That was a joint list. So we created one in Finance Committee, and we took that to the commissioners.
So then perhaps it's a page from the playbook of the General Assembly and appoint a conference committee of both boards that might sit together and hash some of this out in some way. We both, and to say, well, here's our list, and we give it to you again.
That's why I'm making that distinction. I don't think that's gonna help because we did create a joint
Yeah.
list, so we definitely need an alternative strategy.
And perhaps we, honestly speaking, have done enough of putting each other on blast, so to speak. So how do we kind of get past all of that and try to hash some of that out? So I don't have any other suggestions. It may be something like a conference committee akin to the House and Senate and General Assembly between both boards to see if some of us can get in the room and figure some of this out without having to.
So we had a similar proposal that happened while Ms. Cash was board chair.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, the mediation did work then, and it was a more contentious commissioner board then, so I would have good faith that it might actually work to have some type of conference or, but I do think it's different now. I agree with Dr. Martin. We are spending our fund balance down to almost nothing. So it is a different scenario now. So we've done what they've asked to spend our fund balance into this budget. I think we need to ask them for the things we need.
Let me clarify, my statement of ask did not preclude, in fact, I've argued the conference committee idea before, right?
Yeah.
The way we do the ask, I would argue very much
Should be there.
can and should be
And
through
that
that
be-
kind of conference committee style. I mean, the accusation was that we just dumped the budget on their table. We did not do that. But, we've got to do a better job of communicating our needs, but we've got to continue to ask. There was just a news article that the county is looking at a pay equity study, and I'm assuming it's a gender equity. That's going to cost significant cash to bring that together. Now, do I think that's an important thing? You bet I do. But how do I compare that to counselors in our schools? So conference committee is conceivably the way to do this, but we've got to put asks on the table because other asks are going on the table. We can't just sit back and say, oh, okay, we're just going to deal with whatever we got this year.
Yeah, I don't think that's what you're saying, Mr. Sutton. I think it's a combination of
Yeah.
both of those, which is why I actually asked Ms. Cash to speak because she did bring this to my attention last week that under her tenure
Well,
they did that.
I think the fact that, like you talked about was correct, to have a conference type meeting where you have certain people in the room, but it has a mediator involved. So it's just not everybody speaking their piece. It's really trying to get the work done.
Right, yeah, just getting the work done. I'm not saying a mediator.
Get the work.
I don't
Well,
know who that would
it might
be.
take somebody like that. It might take somebody to organize the conversation so that we get the work done, but it can be, we have to do something like that.
Mhm.
You're right, just what you said.
So Dr. Barrow,
Yes, ma'am.
I think I mentioned to you as well in passing last week, hey, Roxy just mentioned this idea, let's think about it. So now Mr. Sutton has very much so recommended the same thing. Any thoughts from your perspective, also having been involved in this as well previously?
Well, I mean, as long as we can keep talking about possibilities, I'm in favor.
Okay.
And if this is another structure that would at the very least enable conversation, yes, absolutely. And it could lead to some improvements. I like borrowing that idea, the conference committee. I sort of like it at elected level rather than staff level. I think it's on your tables now. Obviously, we provide info and assist along the way. Historically, when we did it, like Roxy said, it was a lot more duress. And
Right.
this is voluntary, and I would like, I can certainly support it. We could. So we're good with it.
I mean, there are some of us that, you know, you might start with a small group, a few of us that have served as past chairs who have kind of been in this position, have been down this road, or some of the finance committee. I'm not sure who might make that
Okay.
up. Probably no more than, I would say, 3 from each side that could, that would sit down and agree to hash it out and sort of figure it out.
Okay. I did not propose this to Mr. Hutchison when I spoke with him because we had not talked as a board. Roxy really brought it to my attention last week. So, so now that we've talked about this as a board and I see head nods, and I'm going to let Kathy say her piece, and then we'll talk about moving forward to be talking to Mr. Hutchison about this as well.
Well, as I listen to my fellow board members, I think we have to be real strategic in that this is not a fix to just balance this budget right now. We have some issues coming up, and what we may feel are incredible acute needs today. I think we have some other acute needs that may have a bigger impact on our thinking, and that we need to make sure that we are looking at the class size for next year, our retention of our teachers, what's going to happen. There's to be a lot of dominoes in this, and while I support that, oh my gosh, we made a commitment to our coaches to increase. I don't think if we decided to delay it a year, it means that we're not living up to our commitment. We're still committed to it, but it's the finances of what we have. I think it's worth discussion. I don't know that I would say that we should do that, but I definitely think it's something we need to put on the table. And we have to be very strategic about not coming back with the same thing. I think Mr. Sutton is so correct. Just asking again, we did a really good job of asking, and having a conference, having trust reestablished. We're not going to move until that's established with anyone.
So I think that's twofold. I think having witnessed the General Assembly and Conference Committee doesn't mean that trust is established. It means you come to a means to an end. And I think we actually have to do both, which are very different. There were some very harmful things said publicly, to Mr. Sutton's point too. Things have been said in the media. So there is going to have to be some bridge building, as well as we still have to close the gap in our budget. We still have needs to be met. And that's, I guess, my point, why I pointed out efficiency as one point. We do a great job and we look very efficient to the bankers, so to speak. It does not mean that that's an efficient impact to our families, because it's not, right? So at the end of the day, we could all come to a decision and be efficient as a business, but we are not just a business. We're a business that impact 160,000 kids and families a day. So express busing is not effective to parents.
Right.
Large 4th and 5th grade class size is not effective to parents. So I guess that's my point. I feel like it's twofold to Mr. Sutton's point. We can get the job done. We are adults. I feel confident that the commissioners and a group of board members can come to a final decision. However, I am saying, as a person who ran for the board because I have a kid in the school system, and the long-term impact to families matter, this is a large conversation. I don't want us to kid ourselves that we're going to get in that room and fix a budget. We're not as contentious as it was, but there are still some emotions that are directly being impacted and impacting our kids and our families. Like the email said, I was unplugged and haven't gotten to yet.
Right, absolutely.
I mean, they're there. Those impacts are real today, and we haven't even gotten to class size yet, to your point, Ms. Arnstein. But we already see the impact on our families. That's a little bit of my concern, is I'm not sure we told that story well enough, right? Like, I think about the whiteboards and all the work that we did in conjunction with a small group of commissioners and presented it to their education committee, which every commissioner was there. We didn't just give them a list. We said, hey, we've sat in the room 2 or 3 times and come up with this list that we all felt was important and necessarily. And I'm looking to Commissioner Ford, who's joined us today, who sat in that room with us and presented a joint list. What I still think might be missing is the direct impact, because we can be efficient. And so I just don't want us to lose. We need both of those things. We need efficiency as a business, which we're good at, right? But we also need efficiency, because at the end of the day, we're a great county with a great school system because we care about our families.
And to that
our
point,
budget.
as we possibly go down that road, I mean, part of trying to sort of frame the discussion a little bit, because sort of cringe every time that we say ask.
Yes.
Because it's not an ask. It is not a request. It is in my view, a responsibility of both boards to come up with or solve a solution for this. We are both countywide officials elected from pretty much the same districts and the same map. So we are not a department of the county.
Well said.
We are duly elected officials that serve at the same level or capacity, or whatever you want to call it. So
We're
I don't
peers.
really see it as an ask. We are political peers, if you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. So
That's a really good
Some of
point.
that, I think
We
needs to
actually
be
should
sort of-
probably reframe how we talk about this, to your point. It's a really good
yeah,
point.
yeah. So how we discuss
That's
it,
right.
how we present that.
That's right.
I don't want to say present that, how we dialogue with them, and that is I think we need to change the conversation
I
just a little
totally
bit.
agree. That's a really good point.
So,
Proposed solution.
Yes.
yeah.
Well,
Thank you. That's a really,
our constitutional charge or legislative charge, whatever, is that we are to identify needs, and the county is to find the mechanism to pay for the needs.
Sound basic education.
Yeah.
So I hesitate to use the words ask, I hesitate to use the word bank and banker and everything else that I hear, because it's a responsibility of both.
Very good point.
It's not a request, it's not an ask, we're not coming to the bank, I'm not coming to you, them, hand in toe. We are making a responsible request to fill, where I go again.
Our
but
responsibility?
Anyway,
yeah. I know, we got
My
to
point is
work on the
that-
language change. I appreciate that. It's a really good point. I know, I'm looking at Mr. Desirable or any other comments, which this was actually very helpful for, at least for me. I'm looking at Mr. Winter, Ms. Kimsey, and they're like, yeah, no, we still got this hole down here, Monique. Trust me, I've not lost sight that we still have the hole to fill.
We know.
So we know, I want to make sure. Were you going to say something? Okay.
Well, and to your point, so probably should not just say taking extra pay off the table. I guess everything should be at least considered.
I think we can't make a good decision until we consider everything.
Just delay or half or something.
Yeah.
Well, let's recognize, we're not filling the hole unless we get additional resources. We're just determining which hole we will dig.
Oh, no,
Yes.
that's
right.
No, I deliberately said that's a language change.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the conversation is about the hole that we have, which are the
Yeah,
needs.
exactly.
No, I meant
Yeah.
exactly those words. Thanks to Mr. Sutton and this shift in language.
And
It is
as
a
I'll
hole.
say, I don't know, Shep, I agree with Dr. Merrill, probably gives a conversation against of the electeds, but we would need your help.
Yes, I understand that was your role under when Ms. Cash was the chair of the board. I did not know that. I learned a lot last week. I didn't know that, so I learned a lot. I apologize, Mr. Zardmore. I know this is another big topic, which impacts our budget groups.
How are we gonna do it in 11 minutes?
Well, I got a proposal to you. First of all, I was
Okay.
wondering if it was good or bad to follow a budget discussion. I decided it's good because one of our goals for this was to make this look simpler. I think we just did. With the previous
Good luck.
discussion. What I propose to you is we skip straight the presentation, go straight to the spreadsheet.
Okay.
And talk about that. Who actually has not seen this yet? Who has not been, because it's been to 2 facilities committees.
Yeah.
So.
I didn't see you present it, no.
I didn't see you present it, but I saw it on
Yes.
here.
Okay, all right.
I'm not, but I've been around
Is
for a
this our
long
summary?
time. So
Been a while.
I think I'm a quick
I've
study.
been around for a long time. But with that, I'll
But this
turn it over to
isn't-
Christina.
Very different.
And I will go on to say that this has been to the joint facilities group. They were excited about it. They liked the changes that were there. And it has gone to 2 facilities committees, meetings, and there have been minor changes, minor recommendations in that. Today, again, we're just looking for feedback, more of an information item, and talking about the way we will present it in the future. So, Christina, if you'll talk about this particular part of it, and then I'll go to the big spreadsheet.
This is an example of our new approach towards calculating capacities. And it's really to explain better how we use our classrooms in our schools. And what we start with is school capacity. What is in our permanent buildings as permanent classrooms? And we recognize that there are non-capacity spaces that enhance support education. And then there are the spaces that do represent seats. And as you can see with this chart, we have what are called self-contained classrooms. And they are your special ed regional programs like autism, ID mild, those kind of schools. And we normally average those at 8 to 10 students. And then we have the nuts and bolts of our elementary schools, as you see here, kindergarten through 4th and 5th grade. And we have been using, of course, our current, if you call it, student-teacher ratios, which was for K3 at 21, and we are looking at, reductions this year as well as even more so next year, and 4th and 5th at 26 seats per. So when you add up your classrooms and calculate simply by those seat numbers, you come up with your school capacity. Probably what would be best, Joe, then would be to show the temporary classrooms. And, okay, he's showing the real McCoy, if you will. And this is, let me pull that up so I don't have to be turning my head on you here. Excuse me. What you have here is that same example, but here you're going to see it with all the schools listed. And what we call not applicable seats that are not attributed to these spaces, art, music, your pull-out programs for AIG, LEP, you name it. And then, of course, what is capacity related, your special ed self-contained classrooms and your K through 5. We also recognize that we do gain classroom seats with the multi-track calendar. And you see those represented here for those schools that are on that calendar. Hypothetically, right now, membership totals, and then how that compares to what is our school capacity, and that percentage crowding. And then in the blue highlighted area, you see what we do have as a very big resource, and that's our trailers. And they are calculated and have been at least at 23. Again, we're going to see that number go down with the reduced K3 class sizes. And what that computes into a capacity that includes those trailers. And again, your percentage crowding. So what you see highlighted in yellow to the right there is what we will then show as a final worksheet for your use and would replace our facilities utilization report. But if people want to, dig a little deeper to find out why and how, this would be the worksheet that would back that up.
If I can request you, as you see, we show the number of classrooms that are in each category for each school. So now it is easier for you to sit down and look and compare schools and see why one school's capacity may be different from another. You see the number of classrooms and the type of classroom it is.
While we might not have a seat in a specific grade,
Yes.
we can see that.
I like this.
Me too.
It's much improved.
Joe, I had just one question. Was your plan, once there's comfort around the new approach, to then revise board policy 7245 or just to eliminate it? Eliminate
The
it.
Facilities Committee was recommending to eliminate it.
Okay.
And it's not really a policy issue, it's a practice of staff.
So as you see here, this is what we call the final worksheet. And this would be the sheet that would replace what you used to see as the facility utilization report. Now it's reduced down to just some minimal columns, the membership, the capacity with trailers, and the capacity without trailers, and the crowding percentage for each. So that would replace the other spreadsheet that had a whole lot of columns on it, different types of capacity.
So I guess my question is, where do we go from here? I mean, do we need to formally approve this? I mean, I think this is so much better than what we've had before. Kudos to everybody who's worked on it. Yeah, but
Well, it's been in the kitchen for more than a year.
I know it has.
It's been cooked on for a long time.
Well, let's feast.
Well,
So
if my
let's move
facility
it
chair
forward
and
and start
policy
using
chair
it.
says we don't need it, I think that's pretty impressive.
So here you go with the next steps, basically. This new methodology would be applied to the reduced class size ratio. So the next time we come back to the facilities committee in August, We'll be looking at bringing this same information, but applying the new class size.
Yes, that's what you're
That's what I wanted, that was
Yep.
what I was asking, yeah.
Yep.
And as we mentioned earlier, that final worksheet would replace the annual facility utilization report, and we would recommend that the policy be retired.
Retired.
Retired, Retired. Talk about language change, man, not eliminate, retire.
It worked hard.
It's officially can't be retired. Not the comeback kind of retirement.
But you're not spiking it, are you?
I know we've kind of rushed through this
No
without
opportunity
time
to
to
We've
react.
looked at it so
A
many
couple of
times.
people have not gotten more detail. We'll be more glad to sit down and talk to you about it.
So my recommendation is if there are overarching questions, ask those, and then if there are specific questions, then Mr. Zarmore, Ms. Fletcher, you cooked this and baked this for a while, so you'd be happy to have more detailed questions if folks have them. But if they're big picture questions, because it's 5:23.
Yeah, just big picture, don't want to make any assumptions, what's driving the change?
The assumption has been is that it's been complicated for people to understand how capacity was calculated for each of the schools and being able to compare one school to another and understand why they were different. Plus, we had multiple types of capacity.
Yes.
And so one of the goals was to reduce the numbers of different types of capacity. So we got it down to just the school capacity and school capacity with trainers.
We have the same school physical plan built in different parts of the county that have different capacities based on how the space within those buildings is being used.
Does this give us a more accurate view of a particular space or school?
Yes.
Or does this allow us to, when making comparisons, is it more of an apples to apples comparison, or does it allow us to do both?
Get both. Both. So a Mills Park and a Walnut Creek are the same campus. They have dramatically different uses of the space in those buildings, and they wind up with different capacities. And it's very clear when you see how the spaces are allocated on the big spreadsheet, how you get down to the little reference spreadsheet that we would use for student assignment discussions and things like that. Both are public documents. It's just we use the simplified one for most of our conversation.
In fact, we've talked about we could take this, have this document online, and actually have a link that takes you for under school capacity. You click that column, and it would take you to the bigger spreadsheet that has the more detail. So somebody could dig into it deeper if they wanted.
Plus, it's, this is what we're gonna need, because we're gonna need to be adjusting bases of all the schools as we move forward. This is gonna be what we're gonna need to use as a good tool.
Well, I'd like to also highlight that this does not have any assumption of planned mobiles.
Right.
Which we had in our planned capacity before. This is just clean, here's the core facility, here's the mobiles.
That was confusing.
I have to say, for me, the best thing is, back to understanding, is the questions we get from parents all the way down to a seat. When we say, there is not a seat at this school, they're like, but I'm looking and here's a number of, it just was confusing. So to your point, there's a link, it's easy, it's an easier explanation versus me going back and forth with you and assignment staff about this seat that
Right.
we're all confused what the capacity really is. So I appreciate the ease that it'll also be to us, but also to families. So,
One
thank you,
other
Mr. Fletcher, for your
sort of
Mr.
overarching
Sutton.
question.
Uh-huh.
Since facilities utilization drives, is a big driver in both our magnet piece and our bond program, this doesn't change any figures or capacities of any schools to the extent that it changes any decisions that have been made regarding those two areas, does it?
No,
I assume it does not.
It adds transparency. We had this column in our former sheet for program adjustment. None of us knew what that was. We thought we knew what went into that, but how was it calculated? That's gone. The program adjustment is made by designating how the spaces are used, which then drives, is that a capacity impact or is it not? And so it's much more transparent than it has been in the past. And I understand the core team, county, school district have looked at it and they're celebrating the fact that there's some simplicity and transparency about our facility calculations.
Thank you very much for your leadership, Fletcher. Mr. Zimmer, you're right. You got it done. Yeah, I think you were, no, I'm teasing. But again, like I said, if there are detailed questions, please feel free to ask Mr. Simon or Mr. Fletcher, who's been begging this for a while, alongside staff.
Yeah.
It's 5:27, so you roughly have 3 minutes before we get started. So our work session's adjourned. Is this Manhattan Golden on? Can we get a? Okay. Okay, we'll connect to you in just a little bit again, Lindsay, thanks.